Podcasting from Portland East to Portland West, from Big Pine Key to Pacific Beach, and from San Juan to Guam, this is All Across America. Felipe, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So you're a very talented man. You're a writer for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. You've just written a very engaging book called America Let Me In. It's part autobiography. It's part choose your own venture story. It's part how-to manual. But you could have chosen anywhere in the world. Why take your talents to America?
Well, I think there's several reasons. I've always liked America. I think America's a great country. I hope that doesn't get me canceled in certain parts of profoundly brain-rotted leftist Twitter. But no, I think America's a great country that, the short answer and the answer when I was 21, which is when I moved to the States, is that I wanted to write for television, and the shows that I liked the most were made here in the States.
Yeah.
I wanted to write for something like The Colbert Report, something like SNL, something like The Tonight Show and or Conan, and it just so happened that it was here, and so I was like, well, I should go there to study there. I had the opportunity to maybe move to England, where my family, when I'm from Colombia, but my parents had studied in England. They both lived in Colombia, but at one point they had lived in England, and I had lived in England for a little bit. So I had kind of a connection to the UK, at least a family one. And I had the opportunity to do it, and I was like, well, it seems like if you're the best comedy writer in the UK, the next step is to move to Hollywood. So why would I do two immigration processes if I can just do one? And now it's been 12 years. 12 years since I moved to the States. It's going to be next month. And I'm just about finishing, quote unquote, my immigration process. So I was like, it would have been like 12 years to do England and then 12 more years to do the US. I think I made the right choice, all things considered. But so that was one answer. And then the other answer, which is what I've learned living here and everything, is that I like America as a concept. I like the idea of America, of a nation that considers itself an experiment and a nation that is built for the people, by the people. That's something that hadn't been really done before, say, for like the revolution in Haiti, in the world. And so, because even like if you look at the English Revolution and Oliver Cromwell, it was the same class of people who wanted to stay in power. They just didn't want to have a king. And so the idea of like everyone, and obviously even at its start, it was flawed because it did not include everyone, was very interesting. And I think I consider it very important for humanity and something we got to fight for, right? So like, in this time where autocracy seems to be on the rise, the idea of defending what this country was, what started this country, is really important to me. So I really like this. I think it's one of the few countries that prides itself in its commitment to democracy, and it is up to us to defend that and to maintain that commitment to democracy.
Yeah. And I think the American experiment is, I think, the perfect way to put it. And, for any naysayers out there, saying that America's not a great country or whatever it may be, the whole point is that it's never finished. And there's always
exactly
concern. And that's what in an unfinished product, there's going to be problems. There's going to be, threads that are out of place. And that's the most mild way that I could put it, but
yeah, but
exactly it's evolving.
It's up to people to fix it, to like be like, okay, well, this isn't living up to the ideal. This isn't living up to the standard. Therefore, we have to work on it. And so that is something that now, having lived here for 12 years, is like, well, this is why I like this country. Then Conan O'Brien and Tina Fey, That was the reason why I like this country first. But now it's Conan O'Brien and Tina Fey still, but also the democracy thing, the big lofty thing.
Yeah. Yes, yes, and I mean, I have a great deep respect for, immigrants. I was born in this country, I didn't have a choice, but when you choose
Hmm.
something, and especially the hoops that a person has to jump through to become a citizen or just to come to this country in the first place, that speaks so much rather than somebody that just happened to be born at the local hospital in many respects. Not to say they don't love or appreciate America as much, but you appreciate something extra special when you had to put extra effort into making it happen.
Right. Yeah. Um, I mean, it's it's crazy the hoops that people go through to be here, and I married as my wife puts it, she's also a comedy writer. She writes for Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, but I'm an American by choice, and she is an American by vagina, uh, which is like she was born here, and her mother happened to be here the moment she was biologically born here, and that's it. And then we get into a whole conversation now about birthright citizenship, but it is part of what makes us American, and there are there are differences in being an American by birth and an American by choice, but I don't think that makes us less American than the other. It's that's what's cool is about this country is like, well, we're all American. That's how it works, buddy. And if you don't like that, there's a lot of countries in that old continent that work the other way. So
Yes.
I, to weaponize the language that I see them use sometimes. If you don't like it, leave.
Well, I often think of you hear stories of people trying to cross the border and like they're caught for like the seventh time. And sometimes I
Hmm.
say to myself, there should almost be like an immigration Olympics. Like the person who got caught 7 times trying to cross the border, like that person really wants to be in the United States. Maybe we should just kind
Right?
of let him
At that point,
like,
just give it to him because, like,
yeah,
the
right.
commitment to, even if it's a bit, the commitment to the bit is great. And if
Yeah.
it's serious, then this person really wants to be here more than a lot of people who are already
Yeah,
here.
right. Like, that's a go-getter, in my opinion. That's a
Yeah.
schemer, that's a striver,
Yeah.
right? Isn't that what we're made of? So, I don't know. I mean, I do wish that there were sort of funny ways that we could make things happen, but, you outline a lot of them in your book, and let me just say, I think you covered everything. I learned so much. Again, I was born here. I didn't have to think about any of this stuff. My brother-in-law is from Colombia, and, he
Hmm.
certainly had to think about this stuff, but, um there's one thing that you missed, and that is the CIA. Are you familiar with Operation Paperclip?
Oh, yeah. 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 No, I mean, that's a whole other podcast we're doing. We're gonna go into.
Right,
Now,
right.
I
But
know the CIA agents are watching us right now because they're always watching.
of
So
course,
hi,
yes,
I'm
yes,
waving
yeah.
to them, and I just want to say I am familiar with your work. You guys work really hard.
They do.
Uh,
But
but
yeah,
yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
for
we can't ignore the influence that the United States has had over other countries, especially in the post-war period. And so like uh, the way that we like imported immigrants and certain immigrants that we would be like, whoa, um, those guys seem dicey, uh, and we just don't question it.
right.
But like, I guess we shouldn't have been surprised that Elon Musk did a Nazi salute and was building rockets because we've always had Nazis build us rockets.
Yeah, and for folks listening in that aren't familiar with Operation Paperclip, it began after World War II, where the CIA helped immigrate 1,500 German scientists who are at one time affiliated, many of whom were affiliated with the Nazi Party, to, in part, exactly as you're saying, help us build rockets. And it was, very smart because the Russians started doing the same thing. So I guess it was like, hey, we'll take these guys before somebody else does. And yeah,
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 and
you got some
name
things
them
beat
the
up, but
yeah, and name
so
them the
I'm
head of NASA. You know, like
yes,
the
yes,
first head of
Werner von
NASA was
Braun.
Werner von Braun. Yeah, exactly. So the idea that we used to have like a better or like neater or like only the worthy immigration system back then, which is an idea that people like kind of have these days, like, oh well, the system now is broken, but back in the day it was better. And that's why my grandparents could come here or my great grandparents or blah 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 blah. Um like we've always had a messed up immigration system and it's always been
Yeah,
like we let whoever the national interests uh like kind of like they want the government wants to let in, and if that was people who worked for the Nazis, that was fine. And if it was workers who came from Ireland or Poland or Mexico 100 years ago, that was also fine. um so it's a system that's always been nuts and it's always been
right.
messy because
Yeah, I mean,
the movement of people over borders is always messy.
yeah.
It's not like it was magically better when your great great grandfolks came here, because it wasn't.
No, 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 and I mean, my grandfather Vincenzo immigrated from, Italy, and he came on the steamship Canada to Ellis Island in 1919, and, was he or my family anybody special? No, I mean, at that point, they basically literally let in boatloads of people, and, the only thing that made him special is I guess he didn't have ringworm, and, that's
Yeah, I mean, I say it in the book, but like when I hear people tell me like, oh, my great grandfather or whatever, my grandfather came here the right way. I'm like, the right way was getting into a boat, and it was a very treacherous journey, like
Right,
just like the
right,
treacherous journey. I would say the people who walk across the Darien
yeah.
Gap is harder, but it was a treacherous journey, and um and then they got here and they were like, "Do you have lice?" And they said, "No." Did they have lice? I don't know. Maybe they did. They just said no and they didn't check. And they were like, you know what?
Right.
Welcome.
Right, right. Well, maybe we could talk a little bit about your journey and just kind of maybe you can give us the synopsis of how and I guess what that last step is.
That last step of immigrating here.
Yes, after 12 years.
Yeah. So I was born in Colombia. I lived there most of my life. I lived for a brief time in the UK, which I think is what helped me be good at languages. I was very young. I was like 3 years old.
Oh wow.
Like I remember some things, but not a lot. Um, but I do remember like learning to read in English before I learned to read in Spanish. But then like I lived
Wow.
the rest of my life in Spanish. I went to a bilingual school in Colombia um, that was run by Catholic priests from North Dakota who were very cool and nice. And they, you know, for all the things that people may say, like, oh, this was a Catholic school run by priests. Oh no, some people go to very dark places there, and thankfully everything was pretty good in my experience. Um, and they, it gave me kind of a vision of the world that was like expanded. As a child, I was fortunate enough to have lived in the UK, have lived here, went to a school that was run by American priests. It was a very like, you know, international or like very diverse view of the world. Have being a Colombian person who, like middle class, um, upper middle class, perhaps, because my parents are doctors. And so then I did my whole schooling there. I went to college in Colombia because I had a chance to maybe move to the States or abroad when I was 18 or 17 when I graduated high school. And I was like, you know what? I'm not ready. I don't feel ready to go elsewhere and live on my own. And so I went to college in Colombia and I studied literature there. And about a year into college, my family and I came to New York, and I think I was watching Portlandia or a show like that. And I was like, wait, yeah, people write this. And, I was in school for literature, wanting to be a writer. was like, oh, right. People write all these shows that I love and that I like, I genuinely like, this is the thing that I would love to write. And I just didn't think it was a real career that I could have, that a person from Colombia could have, you know? And so I was like, oh, I should, well, how hard would it be to try that? And I loved New York. I was in New York. Um, I had come to New York when I was like 7. I'd been lucky to have come with my dad on trip. Um, I didn't remember a lot of it. And then we came that time and I was just like, oh my God. And I went to a Broadway musical and, I had street meet, I did all the touristy things and I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest city in the world. And, SNL was here. And at the time, like the Colbert Report, the Daily Show were here. And I was watching all this stuff and I was like, I'm here and I like this. And people write this stuff and maybe I could do this. And so I started to like look into it and I decided, okay, I'll move to the States for grad school if possible, because then that's my first experience with immigration. It's like, okay, well, how do I move to the States to try and get a job in these things? And you look at like work visas and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, that's kind of impossible unless you have like a network and people know who you are. And again, I'm the child of doctors in Colombia. I know no one in this industry. I know no one in entertainment. I don't even know anyone on like a small town newspaper or radio station, you know,
Wow.
like I
That's
have
awesome.
no
I mean, that's
contact.
awesome that you are where you are. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate.
You're
I
not a
worked very
nepo
hard.
baby. You're not a nepo
Yes.
baby.
I had no contact. It's not even that I had no contacts in the industry. I had no contact in the States. Like we didn't have family or friends who lived here, like um and so I decided to like look into it and I decided to apply to grad school. And I studied in at Boston University in Boston. I went there for my screenwriting degree. So I got an MFA in screenwriting. I was there for 2 years and I learned a lot and I wrote a lot. And after that, there was the option to move to LA or to move to New York. I had done a semester abroad, a summer abroad at UCLA, which was very formative when I was in college. After I had made the decision to try and come here and become a writer, of like kind of like stage end or screen writer, I was kind of deciding what to do. And so I went to UCLA and I kind of didn't love LA just in general. I was like, that's probably not my kind of town. I also like didn't have a car. So, you know, I now that I've had a career and have been to LA many times, I have an appreciation for it. I have a lot of friends who live there. I think if my career were to take me to LA, I could be happy and enjoy my life there. But I still love New York and it's still like my home in the States. And so I I went to Boston and then I had the decision to go either out to LA or go to New York. And, this was part of the immigration question. I was on a student visa and I was like asking my professors and my advisors and my classmates, like, oh, what are you going to do? And they were like, I think I'm going to move out west and go out to LA and like maybe like get a barista job and like write my stuff on the side. And I was like, I legally can't do that. Like that is not allowed if you're on a student visa.
Right.
The idea of getting a survival job was not a thing. So I was in even in New York, but I was like, the idea of like moving out to LA and working like as a barista or a bartender or a server, like all these like
Right.
perfectly respectable jobs. This is not I I just couldn't do it. I was not allowed legally to do it because when you are on a student visa, you're given something which is called OPT, which is just a work permit basically to stay in the country for it depends. It can be up to 3 years if you're in STEM, but it's 1 year if you're in the arts because, of course, right? Like you already have it so easy when you're in the arts. So let's make it even easier.
And STEM is 3 times as important, is what they're saying.
Right, exactly. Well, the truth is, STEM has 3 times the lobbyists in Congress, and that's why
Right.
STEM has three more years. Like that. How do you think Google and Apple and Facebook get all those people?
Yeah.
And so you only get OPT for the field of study that you were in.
Right.
So I was a writer and I was a screenwriter. So I could work in entertainment. I could work in entertainment. I could work in writing, but I couldn't work as like any survival jobs. Any like I'm just gonna do this job while I find like gather my bearings in this new city, and then we'll figure it out. Not an option for
Mhm.
immigrants. And so I moved to New York because I had taken some classes at the Upright Citizens Brigade, the UCB, which is a um, very big, very important improv and sketch comedy theater here in New York that was started by people came from Second City, which of course is like the foremost, I would say, like place where like the people who work in comedy are formed. And so then UCB kind of became that for the New York scene. And so I was like, I think I'm going to go to New York. And then I was able to get a gig. Like, I worked for a production company briefly, and then I worked some other like writing gigs. And eventually I got a gig as a copywriter, writing ads. And it was a bilingual copywriter position. And that was really important because I didn't study marketing or advertising. I didn't know, but I could write pithy, and I could write pithy in Spanish and English, and that helped me kind of like get the job that was my day job, and have I had a career in advertising. And through that, I also got my first ridiculously sounding visa, which was the O1 visa, which is the Alien of Extraordinary Ability visa, which is a ridiculous name, which makes you sound
You
like
came from outer space.
truly, like it makes you sound like you're it to me. Alien of Extraordinary Ability always sounds like what the Russian dub of X-Men is, like Alien of Extraordinary Ability, something like that. Or like the Chinese, like made in China doll that is supposed to be X-Men, but it's all wonky, you know,
Right.
the bootleg X-Men. So uh that you find at the dollar store. So I got that visa, which is kind of what you would call an artist visa, although it applies for many other things. It applies for athletes, it applies for professors, things like that. And some people in tech, I think, now have an option to get an L1. Um, again, because they have it so hard, people in tech. And so uh, I was able to do that, and then continue to do my stuff at UCB. I continued to do my writing for different ad agencies. I was able to like kind of build a career doing that. And through doing UCB, through doing some humor writing for humor publications like McSweeney's and The New Yorker, I started to kind of like become a comedian and a comedy person. And I was doing improv, I was doing sketch, I was doing stand up. I was kind of doing a little bit of everything for very little money or no money. I met my wife at UCB. We were both, at clown college, basically. And there, we just kind of like started dating, and then we started dating seriously, and then we decided we were gonna get married. And through doing all that stuff, I started to get invited to submit to late night shows, which is kind of how it works in late night, is that people invite you to submit what they call a packet, which is basically your version of what an episode or a monologue of their show would be. And every show has a different type of packet. Like the Tonight Show will usually ask you for like 2 pages of monologue jokes and some sketches, or like an SNL type sketch, and maybe a game that like Jimmy plays with a celebrity, like stuff like that. You know, Last Week Tonight packet will be very research heavy, and they will usually give you the research, and you will kind of try to write something a little bit more, um, more like the show, like what Last Week
Right.
Tonight is. And the packet for Colbert is like a monologue for Colbert. I did a Conan packet. I did a lot of packets. I did packets for Fallon, Kimmel, Corden at the time, Conan when he was still at TBS, Colbert. I did a bunch of packets for shows that either didn't air and was maybe like a pilot idea and they try to pitch it. And for shows that like were a pilot that maybe they aired the pilot and they were like, that's it, we're done. Like this is not moving forward. Um, and so through that, I got invited to submit to Colbert. and they liked me and they hired me. And I've been there for almost, it's going to be 6 years in October.
Wow. Wow.
And through, I married my wife and got a green card. And that's the immigration element of it all, is like, I married my wife, I got a green card, and all that stuff.
And so, were you able to get your green card through marrying your wife or through other
I
means?
we did it through marriage. I probably, as a writer for Colbert, and not to toot my own horn, but I'm going to do it. Like, as a 5-time Emmy nominee and Peabody Award winner, like all the things that I've done thanks to my job at the show. Like
Yeah.
I'm not taking full credit of all these things. Like I work for an incredible team that does incredible work that deserves recognition and awards, and I'm very
Yeah.
happy and lucky to have been part of that team that has been recognized in the past. I probably could have qualified for the employment based green card, but I love my wife and we were going to get married anyway, so might as well just do the marriage one. you
Yeah.
know?
Right. Right. Do you think having to not have the coffee shop job in the long run helped you, and that you were forced to get right out of the gate, like important, or I shouldn't say important, but work in your field?
I think there is a I think I think there's pros to both. I think I would have enjoyed getting um a survival job, a day job. I think everyone should work in service at some point in their lives. I think it's
Been
important.
there.
It doesn't, not in the like conservative, it builds like old coot, it builds character kind of way. I think more of like, it's a good way to like know what people experience, and people, like normal people in the world, especially if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a person who's writing stuff for everyone, you kind of have to know how people feel about life and their jobs. And, obviously there's a lot of like white collar jobs and you can write about stuff like that. I obviously wrote and have mined my life in white collar advertising for comedy a lot. I also like worked for like I worked for BuzzFeed for a while. I worked for like the classic like millennial social media era boom, not the blogger boom, but slightly right after,
The
so like,
listicle boom.
yeah, the listicle boom, and also like some of the ad agencies I worked with, they were like, we have a basketball hoop in our loft and like inside the office, and we have a foosball table and cold brew on tap, like it was a
Oh,
very
yes,
like
yes.
millennial, like Brooklyn office kind of mentality. So obviously that I've mined for comedy, and the idea of like working in a an office and all that office culture is something that you can obviously mine for comedy. And so many people do nowadays on like TikTok and Reels. You see all the memes and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but I do think having a survival job and a job in service is important, and I do think it gives you a vision of the world that I think everyone should have. I also feel like I didn't have that experience here in the States, but I did have something that I call like a little like fire under my butt that was like, well, if you want to get this alien of extraordinary ability visa, it's actually quite hard to get. You have to have a lot of work. You have to have my first application for an alien of extraordinary ability visa included, it wasn't all of it, included a 700-page portfolio
Oh
of
my
my work.
god. Wow.
And that wasn't even the full application. There's also the forms and the stuff that you're like submitting, and some other stuff that you have to submit. And those is usually about 10 letters of recommendation from like people in your industry who are saying like, you're very good, you are extraordinary, because it's alien of extraordinary ability. And so I was doing, I had to do stuff. I had to constantly be working and creating things so that I would have either people who would vouch for me and write letters of recommendation, or literally just stuff to put in the portfolio, you know? So that was a blessing because it taught me to never like stay still, and to be like, I'd have to keep doing more stuff aside from just what I do. And I value that because it's a thing that I still have to this day. I was working at the Late Show. an incredible job with incredible people, having the the best time. And also, I wrote a book, about a humor book about immigration, and I was like, I didn't have to do that, but I wanted to, and I liked it was certainly a lot of work, and so the idea of like building that, and I think also my degree in my MFA was helpful because that also taught me another skill that I think is really important in writing or in the arts, which is like, I had a script, a screenplay, a full screenplay due on like whatever, Monday the 23rd. I'm making this up. That meant that if it was Friday the 19th, I had to finish over the weekend. Like that is the reality. That is the deadline, and you just got to sit down and write. And when we're in the arts and in writing in particular, you're kind of like that. You have that kind of mentality of like, well, I if I just sit with the idea a little bit more and like think about it, it'll be better. And it won't, because it won't be written. you know and so it was important that those were two skills that I think I appreciated from my journey. The like, it has to be done, and the like, you got to do more stuff. You got to always be doing something,
Yeah.
um, because that'll help your case for the visas, but also because it'll help your career.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in the book, in the acknowledgement section, I don't think I've seen this before, you thanked your lawyer.
I did. I did. I thanked my immigration lawyer. I say the truth. Which is that I wouldn't be here. I would not be here without her. you know, because she's a great immigration lawyer. I love her. Her work is excellent. I vouch for her work. And she's it's a very stressful thing. You develop this relationship with a person who knows so much about you, but it's a professional relationship, but also like they hold your life in their hands a little bit, and they don't, because really they're just like shepherding you into this journey, and they're doing the best they can. Hopefully you're paying them quite a bit of money to do it, and they are shepherding you, but in the end, the decision is in the hands of the USCIS, and usually it's in the hands of one officer in an organization, a federal organization.
Who could be hungry, could have a bad day, and could just,
100%,
right,
and
some
anytime you have an interview, it's like, oh man, I hope you don't have. It's that thing that they say about judges, right? That you don't
right
want to get
before
a
lunch.
case right before lunch. Like I feel like that must happen with immigration officers as well.
Right, right. I remember the study that judges handed down harsher sentences right before lunch and more lenient sentences after lunch, which is
Yes,
crazy,
exactly,
which is crazy, and,
exactly.
like, to say, I'm doing 3 extra years in the slammer because the guy presiding over my case hadn't had his sandwich yet, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, we're all human, and that's something that
Yeah,
I think I really, um how to put this. I really try to remind people when we talk about immigration and the immigration journey on both sides, you know, whether it's the officers in adjudicating and deciding over cases, and the people applying for visas or asylum, or coming here irregularly. It's all humans and it's all people, and it's important sometimes when we talk about immigration. It's become such a subject because people in power have not done anything to actually make positive change in the system in 30 years, since Bill Clinton. Because of that stasis, we've allowed it to become a concept. Immigration's a concept. Everyone has thoughts on immigration, everyone has ideas about immigration, but uh, no one remembers that it's about people moving from one place to another and people making decisions about that. So there is an element of humanity that we lose anytime we're talking about immigration, because we're thinking about it as a political issue or something to be
right,
fixed. And it's like, yeah, sure. But like, we're talking about people coming here. And if we're talking about humans, then let's talk about what that can be, positive or negative, But it's like, okay, well, more people, that's a lot, that means more housing, more jobs that we're probably going to fill. but also we don't have jobs. So maybe that will be good. And demographics, that's also going to be a big factor. And I'm not even talking about the sappy, let's think about the human element of like every human has a story. That's talking about like it from a almost economic point of view. And then you add the human, like sentimental layer to it. And then that's when you got to say, like, oh, wait, we really got to do something about the system that isn't just, you know, tossing it to the other party whenever they're in power, like it's a hot potato, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I think very much what it's become is
Yeah.
a political hot potato, and I mean I'm always reminded of the story from the quote from Mussolini, and he said, you know, one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic, and you know if you can talk about the stories, the human behind it, and not as a political thing, as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's why I wrote the book, you know, like the book is silly. It's a very silly book that basically makes up most of the stories in it. You know, it tries to explain different kinds of visas by telling different stories of mostly fictionalized or fictional people. There is my path you can take, and if you follow certain of the paths within the interactivity of the book, you can take my path and kind of see a version of my life, a fictionalized version of my life. But the other stories are either I took some element of real stories and real people that I knew, but for the most part, they're fictional. But they are immigrant stories, and I wanted to like tell people, hey, this is a story of people who might be your neighbor. And the reason I chose that second person format where you're the character is to kind of remind the reader you could be this person. This person could be you, could be your neighbor, could be your like brother-in-law, right? Like it could be your future spouse. You don't know. And that's what makes this, I think, this country great is that we all live here and we all have to like learn how to live with each other. And so if you learn a little bit more about these people that you see only as an abstraction because of what the news or social media tells you, maybe I'm not saying it's going to change your opinion. I don't pretend to believe that comedy can change people's opinions. I think comedy can help people feel seen or recognized. It can help maybe call out things. I don't think comedy has persuasion powers, but it certainly has um bring to your attention powers. And so that's all I can ask for with the book. It's like, okay, well, read this and that that might that might just make you think a little bit harder or a little bit differently about the point of view that you have or about the one subject that I know a little bit about, which is immigration.
yeah, yeah. And your story starts with the choose your adventure for your story is, do you know the Smiths?
Yes.
Can you talk about why the Smiths are so popular in Latin America?
Oh, that's fascinating. I don't know. I think it's because they are in this kind of wave like The Cure and what other band? I mean, there's a lot of heavy metal bands that are very popular in Latin America. But I think in this kind of world of like sentimental indie, moody kind of music, the Smiths and The Cure are quite popular. And, you know, we have Latin American goths and Latin American emos, which is like the city where I'm from, Bogota in Colombia, it's quite cold. It's like fall weather year round because it's up in the mountains, which is great. But I have friends who were like emos and like scene kids in a city like Santa Marta, which is in like the most tropical Caribbean climate you can imagine. I'm like, these are the real goths because they're willing to do all that
100
in this, yeah, in this
and 100
climate, in this
degree.
weather. Exactly. So, um,
Yeah, yeah,
so
and
I think it just somehow like it grabbed on. Nirvana is also very big. I think it's because they were the bigger bands that
yeah.
like just translated and the sentimental kids were just like, yeah, I also I do feel like if a 10 what is it if it if whatever bus crashes into us, to die by your side is such a beautiful way to die. uh I felt it, man, and I think
Yeah,
that that's a
yeah.
universal feeling. And it's a shame that Morrissey's kind of an asshole now. But
Yeah, he's
but
hardcore vegan. Yes.
yeah, but also like kind of like maybe voted Brexit and like hates migrants. Uh, and so it's like, okay, well, the music's good.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, and it's just very strange because I think when people think of, Latin America and Latin music, they don't think of a melancholy crooner from Manchester who sings songs such as "Girlfriend in a Coma" and "Heaven
yeah.
Knows I'm Miserable Now" is not the first thought.
Yes, I think, but I think that that's another thing is like there, like Latin America, like why not both? Like that like that ad that used to say like the little girl said, "Por qué no los dos?" Right? Like you can have the tropical and exciting and dancey music, but you can also like the sentimental crooners, and like I enjoy in equal parts Bad Bunny and like Andrew Lloyd Webber. So it's not we don't have to separate. You can enjoy both, and that just expands your palette.
That's right. That's right. That's I'm the same way. I'm all over the map, and I like it. People always try to fit folks into boxes, and if people can't do that for me, all the better. So, talk about travel because your name is can be so important. And I have a friend of mine whose name is Mike O'Neill, and he's
Mhm.
always getting stopped because I guess there was an IRA guy who also shared that name. And I am one of two Mark Vigliottis in the entire world, Mark with the C. And there's one
Uh-huh.
other guy. He's a bus driver on Staten Island. And I'm always saying to myself, do not screw up, bro. If you screw up, it's going to look bad on me. If this guy gets arrested
Have
for,
you
I don't
met
know,
him?
I have not. I tried to connect with him on Facebook and he never accepted my friend invite. So I don't know. I don't know. But there's somebody similar that shares your name that has raised some red flags.
Yeah, so I think I'm the only Felipe Torres Medina. I've looked and Googled and all that stuff. But uh as a Latin person, like my full name is technically Carlos Felipe Torres Medina, but my dad goes by Carlos Torres, so I was like, I kind of want to do my own thing. So I like my middle name Felipe, and that's become my name and the name with all like I'm an author, and that's my name as an author and stuff like that. And in Latin culture, we have our dad's last name and our mom's last name, right? So Torres is my dad's last name, Medina is my mom's last name. And what that does is like it's a beautiful way to celebrate your heritage and your family and both sides of your family. And also it is a pain in the ass when you're traveling because, people will say, "What's your last name?" And I'm like, "Torres Medina." They're like, "We'll put it, is that hyphenated? Is it like, what do you mean?" And then I was like, "No, it's two." So wait, what do you mean you have two last names? That's an oxymoron. But so it's always a pain in the ass. And so there's some people, I guess, who have had a certain combination of my names who've committed certain crimes. Um, there was a Colombian, I believe, paramilitary leader who went by the alias Felipe Torres, which is my middle name and my first last name. But this person is either in jail or dead many years ago. This was in the 90s. And so, but also I guess there's some other people who have had certain combination of those four names. And so when I was on visas and I was trying to come into the country, even though like I was like on legal visas, I've never broken the law, anything like that. I had to be taken to the back room usually at JFK because I live in New York, and they had to check that I wasn't the person that they maybe thought I was, which we all know proving a negative is easy. So I I just had to sit in a room while they checked on a database that I wasn't who they thought I was. And they, I mean, they probably knew that I wasn't who I thought I was. At one point when I was applying for my first student visa or my second student visa, I I remember I was in the U.S. embassy in Colombia, and the way a U.S. embassy works is like it's a big bunker, and you kind of do TSA and leave your phone out. You're not allowed to bring anything, but like I think they let me bring a book because I was in college. I remember I was reading Waiting for Godot. I was reading an
Good book.
absurdist. doing an absurdist play while waiting to get my visa, which seems like a
Perfect.
little on the nose. Uh, but I remember I was waiting for Gatto, and they called me up. And when they call you to do the interview, to make sure that you're the person who you claim you are, and that you have the funds to come study in the States, all the things, all the documentation you have to present, you have to talk to them through like a prison phone. Like they're behind plexiglass or like behind, bulletproof glass. That behind that glass is US territory. That's the embassy, right? And on the other side of the glass, it's all the Colombians. And so, I was talking to them, and I give them my documentation and everything. And I had gotten Torres visas before. I was aware of how the system worked, and the guy just goes like, just have you recently lost about 200 pounds? And I was like, what? No. And I wanted to say, oh my God, you noticed. But I'm like, no, I obviously hadn't lost 200 pounds,
And
because
this
I
was
don't think that.
before the days of Ozempic.
Right. And I don't think at the time, at that point in my life, I had ever weighed 200 pounds. I had never
Right.
had 200 pounds to lose, because I was 18 or something like that.
Right. Right.
Uh, and so, yeah, I guess this person that they were looking for might have been overweight, or like, upwards of 300 pounds, I assume, because I was like 100 and something. And so that was like one of the fun experiences about having a similar name. And, I have had fun and less fun experiences in the back room. We're just like trying to prove that I'm not that person. And thankfully, since I got my green card, I think they've run the background checks to make sure before they give me the green card, to be like, obviously this isn't that person.
Got it.
So I have been able to avoid the back room and all that entails. But maybe my green card took a little bit longer than expected because of that. They were running the background
Yeah.
checks. I don't know.
Yeah, makes sense. And you talked about forms, and like it almost seems like getting the immigration is like the DMV on steroids.
Oh
It's
yeah,
the DMV.
absolutely. That's exactly what it is. It's just forms on forms on forms on forms. I mean, everything has three forms. You're applying for a change of status. That means you have to file form 470 whatever, forms I-751, and form G-20 whatever. And that's why you need an immigration lawyer, honestly, because they know what they're doing, and you're just
Right.
truly following their lead. They're very expensive, but if you can find a good one, you just stick to them, because I mean, it's your whole life, right? You're trying to build a life in this country. You're trying to build a career. You have family here. You have fallen in love here. All the things, even for like a marriage green card, it's so many forms, and you would think it's like the easy, like, well, an American has chosen me to be their spouse, and it's a legit bona fide, you know like real marriage. You'd think it would be easy, but even that has, I mean, I think that might be the one that has the most forms, even than applying for
Really?
citizenship or some of the visas. And then for the O1, the artist visa, that's where you have a lot of paperwork, not just the forms, but also, like, as I was saying, like the portfolio and
700
you know,
pages. Oh my
the
god.
proof of your life and of your work to prove you're extraordinary.
Did you and your wife have to have a joint interview, or actually even a
We
separate
did, yes.
interview?
We didn't have to do a separate interview. No, no,
Okay.
no. I think our case was pretty clear that we loved each other. But some people do, and sometimes, even though you have like, again, a legitimate marriage, they might separate you, and they ask you things that I think are, I understand, but I'm a little bit like, I don't think that a real marriage would be able to answer some of these questions. Like,
Right, I
I,
bet.
I,
Yeah.
I know that they ask people like, what color is your partner's toothbrush, or like, what's the color of the curtains in your room? And I suspect that most men would be like, I don't know, gray, white. I don't know. Like,
Yeah,
in fact, I think it's shadier if you know the color of your wife's
really, yeah.
toothbrush. I
Yeah,
think that raises a flag.
I have no idea, and I have no idea what our colors are. Well, I guess I have a better idea of what colors our throw pillows are, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
or
like, things they ask you. I mean, the one that I think everyone should answer and would probably know how to answer is like, what side of the bed do you sleep on?
Ah,
and they
fair
ask them
enough. Yeah.
separately. Do they ask your partner and yourself
Wow.
and that kind of stuff? I've heard. Again, I haven't had to do this. And also, I was lucky that even though my wife and I both work in entertainment, at no point did we have to live apart because, in entertainment, especially pre-COVID, most of the jobs were in LA
Right.
and we were both living in New York. And thankfully, at no point did we have to live bi-coastally, like one of us in LA, one of us in New York, because that technically would have raised a flag like, oh, you're a
Right.
legitimate marriage, but you guys don't even live together,
Yeah.
But obviously, we would have found a way to explain it. And, my wife and I like are very much like, let's never spend more than 2 weeks apart if we can. So we probably would have tried to make it work. But I think that would have been something that would have certainly raised the flag and maybe have forced them to do a separate interview.
Wow. And you talked about, friends helping you, folks that were also going through the process. Are there what is your recommendation for people who are in the thick of it? And, I mean, are there, like, Reddit forums that you could check? I mean, like, when you went into the spousal interview, were you, like, prepared for some of these questions or
I mean, yeah, like definitely your lawyer is your best friend. Like your lawyer is going to have all the answers to these particular things. But also, like, I had friends who were also immigrants who recommended, like, I think I got like recommendations for lawyers. I got recommendations for like, I wouldn't have heard about the Alien of Extraordinary Ability visa if it weren't for a friend who was in doing improv with me. And she was from the Netherlands, and she was like, "Oh, I have one of those." And I was like, "Wait, do you have like an Oscar or like an Emmy?"
Right.
And she was like, "No, you don't have to have. If you have those, that's great. But if you don't, you can make your case." And that's how I got mine, and that's how at the time she got hers. And so, there's all these like whisper networks almost of immigrants, and you meet more immigrants, and there's also this kinship that immediately forms when you're in any space and you meet another immigrant. There's a little bit of like, oh my god, you know the lingo, you know the terminology. We can talk about this. If you hear the words OPT or any of those things that only immigrants or people who've gone through immigration or who know someone who has have heard, it kind of creates a like, oh my god, we speak the code. And so um that creates kinship, and you help each other in that way. But also, like, Americans help me, like, you meet people who are willing to give you jobs, people who are willing to, like, at least in the world of the arts, like, give you a chance, who will write you a letter of recommendation. So it I say it in the book, in the acknowledgments, it takes a village to raise an immigrant. Like, when you're an immigrant, you require sponsorship oftentimes, like whether it's a company or a person requesting you. And so I think every immigrant has, even though they're like the legal sponsor that you put in your visas, I think every immigrant has a huge village of sponsors helping
Wow.
them make this journey.
Yeah, you said something in the book that I really liked. It takes a tremendous amount of luck and generosity of people who just choose to be kind.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a like pay it back kind of thing. Like, I have met many immigrants in my time here, and I have been lucky to work in entertainment, to work at a great place, and to be able to like write letters of recommendation for other immigrants who are trying to get this kind of visa, to um, maybe like not give them a job because I don't have like the ability to hire them, but maybe like collaborate on a project, things like that. Cause it's like, yeah, of course. And also, like, not only because I want to help them, but because I know that these people are very talented. So why would I limit, like, oh, they're an immigrant? Like, that's the reason why, like, they work very hard and they're doing a lot of good work. They're here at this point, you know, you they've already worked very hard to get here. So, like, collaborating with them is always a thrill for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a part-time job. I mean, not only in the hours spent, but just the mental energy.
Yes, 100%. It's You never stop thinking about it. It is impossible to not think about it because it haunts every single moment of your life. I started dating my wife when I was waiting to hear if I was going to get approved for my first O1. We went on our first date, and or something along those lines. And it's like very interesting to go on a first date with someone that you immediately connect with. And both of you now, like I explained my situation to her in that date because we immediately connected. And it's a very strange situation to be like, yeah, I met someone and they're great. And maybe in 2 weeks, probably never gonna see them again because we're both in our 20s and I'm moving out of the country, like,
Yeah.
so it's always in your life. It's always on your mind.
Wow. I mean, it's almost like you're living your life in limbo for years and years.
Yeah, a little bit.
Wow. And can you talk a little bit about the fees? In the book, you outline all of the various forms, and I mean, that's not even including the lawyer's fees.
Yeah. We have I mean, the the government, when the government shuts down because Congress can't agree on a budget,
Right.
one of the few federal agencies that does not have to shut down is the US Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is a division of Homeland Security, but the USCIS does not have to shut down because it funds itself with fees paid by immigrants.
Right. Wow.
So that's how much money it costs to come to America. All the immigrants from all the countries, even they're coming on tourist visas just to visit, that's like $300 a pop. And now they've added a new like visa integrity fee, which I think is $250 that was announced
Aha.
last
It's
week.
like a Ticketmaster surcharge.
Exactly. Like we got to verify that the visa that we're giving you is authentic. What?
Right. Right. Wow.
Uh, so, uh, it is very expensive. That's talking just about tourist visas. Student visas are incredibly expensive, and most universities in most programs, unless you're doing like a PhD, do not give financial aid to students. You're obviously not allowed to apply for federal loans because you're not a
Right.
resident or a citizen of the
Yeah.
United States. So you kind of have to be able to pay full tuition for a university in the States, which is more expensive than in Europe and in the rest of the world. And that's for a student visa. Like O1s costs, in the hundreds of dollars just to apply, but then you also can pay thousands to get premium processing, which is basically a $2,500 fast pass, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
uh H1B, which is the work visa, the traditional work visa, companies have to pay upwards of $5,000 for that to like happen. And in that particular case, it's a lottery. It's literally the H1B lottery. Like you can be Meta, you can be Google. If you're applying for an H1B for a worker, there's only so many places and they will be drawn. Like the people who do get those visas every year are drawn via lottery.
Wow.
So it is a crazy system and it requires a ridiculous amount of luck, but also a ridiculous amount of money. And so the idea of like people saying like, well, if they want to come here and work, they should just come here the right way. It's like, but it is impossible for a like maybe a low skill worker from El Salvador, to come here and move here to like work in farms like they want to do, that they're happy to work in farms picking our food. They're happy to work in construction. Like we need those jobs anyway. And it is practically impossible for a person to do that earning wages in countries in Central America, in Africa, in Europe,
Right.
you know
Yeah.
and so the idea of like, well, they should just come here the right way is just grossly misinformed or like ill-informed. It's just not, it just means you don't know. When someone says they should just come here the right way to work in the same jobs and the same way that just means you don't know. And I'm not saying that that will change your opinion, as I said before. It just means you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm just seeing all the different permutations and it's like, yeah, if you're, lower income laborer that wants to get a job as a roofer, it is almost impossible. Unless, you're not a hot model. If you're a hot model, it's a little bit different, if you
Yeah, and
invest.
yeah, it's really bizarre. And I think the narrative and the rhetoric around it, I think, is the complicated issue, is that we've built these rhetorics around it instead of actually learning about the system and
Yeah.
informing ourselves. So like then the rhetoric's like they're coming and doing this bad thing, or they're coming and doing this good thing. But we're like, we're not talking about how they're coming and how like how hard it is, and how
Yeah.
we do need immigrants, and we do need not just for the like the what we would call like, you know, very hard, very respectable, but very hard jobs of like picking our food and construction and things like that. You know, like tech companies need them. You know, we
Yeah.
hire immigrants every day because we have built, and this is the to me the hard thing about what's happening right now with universities as well, is like we have built a place where people want to move to, a place that people covet, and it's a place that also like has um an incredible education system.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you want to keep the people that you've educated and make them work for you for the betterment of this country? Because also immigrants, as I think I've proven myself in this interview, are incredibly America pilled. We love America. We chose it. You know,
Yeah.
we're like, oh
Yeah.
my God, this is great. You take me to Target, and I know like people are boycotting Target because of the choosing to end DEI. And I totally agree with like that was dumb. But I love Target. I love going to Target. I'm like, it's my most immigrant dad trait. It's like, just leave me at the Target. It's the best place on earth, you know? So I think, you know, immigrants love this country, and it is a loss of so much. It's such a missed opportunity to not just engage honestly in ways to make the system better for immigrants. And for because in the end that makes the system better for
Yes,
America.
exactly, exactly. I mean, and it's just getting back to Werner von Braun and Operation Paperclip. You know, would you want those people going to Russia? No, you want them coming here.
Well, yeah, you want the best people. You have to want the best people. And so
Yeah,
uh and I think, you know, there's arguments to be made about who the best people are, and that's where we're going to have like ideological differences with like the people who are in power. But in the end, the best people are the people that are needed. And who does the country need right now? And it's I think a little bit of everyone. We're in a demographic slump.
yes, yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, you said you had one last step after 12 years. What is that?
Oh, I got my green card, and I got my like my stuff, and you know, we'll see about citizenship and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So, any final thoughts, you know, for folks, for just people listening at home, citizens or not, wannabe citizens, people listening from around the world?
I think, you know, this is a great country, and we gotta keep fighting for its ideals. I think I say it in the book, but I I talk about like the great American experiment, and I do think we're an experiment, and we have to keep working to make the experiment better. And
Yeah,
and this is for anyone of any persuasion, political persuasion. I think part of the experiment is that we work on it together. And right now, maybe at least for me, the experiment is in the hands of people that I wouldn't like leave the experiment in the hands in. Like, let's say we're all in a group project, you know, or in class, and right now I think there's a person who I wouldn't trust with the experiment. Not just a person, several people, and but it's our experiment, and so whatever they do to it, eventually it's going to come back to us, and we're going to have it. And it's up to us to try to preserve the experiment and to make sure that when we get the experiment, it's it didn't explode, you know?
right, right.
And so to me, and I'm sure they feel the same way when the people that are my political persuasion have the experiment in their hands. But that I think is the beauty of it, is like, oh, we've lost and forgotten the fact that we're all in this group project together.
Yes,
And
yeah,
hopefully, you know, I personally, in my opinion, think there's one party that is more guilty of that than another, but I think they would say the same about the other party. Agree to disagree on that point. But I do think we have to remember that like it can't all just be party politics. It can't all just be hot potato issues that we keep tossing at each other. Because what happens with that is what we see when we have seen in every election, in my opinion, since Obama's second term, which is dissatisfaction. People are dissatisfied with whoever's in power. So they didn't like Obama, they're going to vote for Trump. They didn't like Trump, they're going to vote for Biden. They didn't like Biden/Harris, they're going to vote for whoever's the other option. And we see it right now.
all over
Trump,
the place.
exactly. And Trump hasn't been in power for 9 months, and people are already like, this isn't working. Because in the end, neither of the parties are working for anyone except for party politics. And so I think it's important for all of us to remember, like, hey, this is about us. This is about the people and working together and helping each other to build this experiment. So that would be my thing. And my other thing is like, immigrants are great. Don't believe what they tell you on the TV. Like, go meet an immigrant in your town, and I promise you'll like them. So they're pretty cool people, and they make good food.
Well, Felipe, the book is called America Let Me In, a Choose Your Immigration Story. How can people find out more about you?
You can find me on social media. I'm at Felipe Torres Medina on Instagram. I think I'm at Felipe Torres Medina on TikTok. And I was on Twitter, but I don't post there a lot nowadays because of everything. But if you're on Threads, I'm at Felipe Torres Medina because that's my Instagram handle. And yeah, you can find out more about that there. You can also go to my website, felipetorresmedina.com. You can Google Felipe Torres Medina writer and order the book from your local indie bookstore or wherever you want, wherever you get books. I read the audiobook. You know, it's fun. I do voices.
Cool. Nice. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Well, Felipe, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
All Across America is produced by me, Marco Vig, in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Visit us on Instagram at All Across America. Check out our website, allacrossamerica.com. There's an interactive map with all our episodes, and there's a Contact Us page where you can send your reactions, guest ideas, and suggestions. So get in touch, stay connected. To me, that's what podcasting is all about. Thanks for listening.